nice, whatever. And if you were to see someone on that madrega, there's even a special bracha you make. So there's such a thing as objective beauty. There is also such a thing as subjective beauty. I like them tall and skinny. Somebody else likes them short and stout. Somebody likes them with blonde hair. Somebody else likes them with dark hair. Somebody likes long legs. We all have big chests. We all have our own personal turn-ons. So does a Yafes Torah have to be objectively beautiful, or does she simply have to turn the soldier on? We're going to get into that. So the first thing we're going to deal with, Tana Rabbanan, Ra'isa B'Shviya. You see her at the time that the army is gathering the booty. Okay? B'Shas Shviya. That means you can only take her if your contact with her is based on lust. If we're rounding up the enemy to turn into slaves, for example, and she's in and they're divvying out the slaves, and you take her home and she's your slave for a while, and then you lust after her, that's no good. You have to lust first, like later. Okay? All right. Ashes, the pasuk uses the word ashes, which is typically a word, even though it literally means the woman, but it usually is used to refer to a married woman. And the Gemara says that even if she has a bond to a non-Jew. In other words, she's a Midianite and he's a Midianite, and they're married, they got 2 kids, but she's a hottie and you lust after her, you can take her anyway. Okay? Now, Yafes Torah, that she is especially beautiful. Lo dibra Torah ela keneged Yetzirah. The whole point of this parsha is because the soldiers start feeling lust. And if we don't allow him to take one woman, he might do horrible things to lots of women. So even though the pasuk specifically says an astonishingly attractive woman, the only reason it says that is because whatever her qualities are, it rouses lust in the man. Mutav sheyachli, which means that he can take a non-objectively attractive woman, a subjectively attractive woman, because she turns him on. Okay? And now the Gemara makes a cute little analogy. Okay, understand that the Torah, that this is not a good thing to take her. It's sort of a not good thing. So, mutav she'achla Yisrael basar tumusos keshrutos. If an animal is so sick that it's about to die, that's not typically your first choice for dinner. Nonetheless, if the animal 5 minutes from now does die, eating it then is worse. So the Gemara says the analogy to taking the Yafes Torah is that it's better to do even a sick animal properly, shecht it first, than to wait a few minutes and let it die and eat nevela. Okay? Yachlu basar to Musa's nevela. Okay.
Excuse me, Rabbi Bar. Why do we allow him to have a married woman?
I explained that 3 times already. Because Judaism does not recognize as kedusha the relationships of other people, and in fact, if a woman older than 3 converts to Judaism, even if she has simone b'sula, even if she is objectively a virgin, the reason a Kohen can't marry her is we assume non-Jewish women have sex at the drop of a martini. Okay, so it really doesn't matter if she's married or she's not married. Okay, but lest you think that, well, I should give deference to the fact that she's got this Canaanite boy husband, or we say no. All right, weiter. Okay, v'chashakta, and you lust after her, you desire her. Now, this is the point I made earlier. Afal pi she'eina noah, even though she's not objectively beautiful, if she turns you on, you're allowed. Okay, and the pasuk uses the word ba, her, v'lo ba b'chaverta. You can't take two women. Okay, only one. V'lakachta, and you take. Now, the word lakachta is used for marriage as well. So, lekuchin yesh lecha ba. It has to be that there is the possibility of you're having a relationship, an ongoing relationship with this woman, even after the month of making her ugly and so on and so forth. But it can't be. Okay, so if you have absolutely no interest in keeping her after a one night stand, then it's no deal. Okay, so again, we're putting boundaries around this behavior. We have the Pesach to say that you can do this with this woman, but then we put boundaries around it, and it's all a protective mechanism so that you can channel your lust or let your lust dissipate and not act in a shameful manner in a war. Okay, so now, you take her to you for a wife. Shelo yikach shtei nashim. You can't gather a couple of ladies. Achas levi, achas laviv. You want to bring one home for tati. You can't do that. Achas levi, achas lebino. You have a son who is not successful in shidduchim. You bring a girl home for him. You can't do that either. Okay. Vehevesa, and you bring her home. Literally, you bring her in. Okay, Milamed Shalo Yilchatzena b'milchama. That means you can't rape her on the battlefield. You have to actually capture her and take her home. Now, we mentioned earlier there's a machlaikas as to when the first act of bia with her can occur. We're learning like Rashi, who says after you, some say it's before you take her home when the battle settles down, but you're still out at war. Rashi suggests it's when you bring her home, but before you shave her head and dress her in rags and stuff to make her unattractive. You get one bite of the apple, so to speak, and then she has this transitory month where she mourns her father. She is made intentionally to look disgusting, to lessen your attraction to her. She learns about Judaism. She goes to the mikveh. Now she's Jewish, and now you can marry her. All right, and now you can have a second bia, obviously. Okay. So, next, that finishes that. So we dealt with whether the Kohen can have the master give him a girlfriend while he's in slavery. We said no. Now we basically are saying no, a Kohen can't do the Yafis Tar business because once she becomes Jewish, you can't marry her, and that's the end point of that issue. So, Mistama, the way the Gemara is learning, we do not allow a Kohen to have a bedmate when he's a slave, and we do not allow a Kohen to access a non-Jewish woman when he's in battle. Now we're going back to the Mishnah and back to the original topic, which was the pierced ear. This whole thing was a deviation from pierced ear, because if you recall, we said a Kohen can't get his ear pierced, at least according to the Shita, that it's not the earlobe. Now we're going to go into Ritzia and the both the implications and the methodology. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Im Aimer Yaima. Pasuk says, if you say, re-say, if you indefinitely say, but the point is the word Yaim, Aleph Mem Resh is repeated as there twice. Ad Sheyamar V'Yishna. So we learn from that the statement "I don't want to leave" must be made twice by the slave who doesn't want to leave. Okay? Now, when is he going to say it? Amar v'tchilas sheish. If he says it 10 minutes after he's captured or in the first week, very early in his servitude, v'lo amar b'sof sheish, but he says it twice then, and he doesn't say it at all 6 years later. Ein nirtza, you cannot pierce his ear. Shenemar lo eitzei chavshi, because it says, I don't want to go free. Now that the implication is I don't want to go free, as the master said, your time's up, pack your bags. And he says, I don't want to go. So logically, saying it at the beginning is no good. Okay? Ad sheyomer b'shas yitzia. He has to say it at the time he's leaving. Omer b'sof sheish. If he says it twice at the end, La Amr b'tchilas sheish, but he didn't say it earlier in the servitude period. Ein nirtza, you can't pierce his ear then either. Shenemar im Amar Yomar, because it says it twice in the pasuk. The word "say" is repeated in the pasuk. So we're now at this point saying he says it once at the beginning and once at the end. Okay, but that's problematic too. What?
Sound really too logical. I mean, at the end, I could see him screaming a couple of times. At the beginning,
Well, more. That's not the way to look at it. What does he say? He says, "I like my Esther. I like the woman I was given to live with. I like my kids." So 2 weeks into the into his being a shibud, where are the kids? There ain't any kids yet. Where's the woman? He may not even have gotten her yet. So we're good. At this point, we're saying once at the beginning, once at the end. Amar Ma, one of the Tanaim teach. Amar b'tchilas sheish. If he says it at the beginning, v'lo amar b'sof sheish, but he does not say it at the end. Ein nirtza, he can't go free. Shenemar lo eitzei chavshi, I don't want to go. My ayami lo eitzei chavshi. Why does the Tana take the phrase from the pasuk, I don't want to go free, as his raya? The be'inan ahavti es adoni es ishti es bonai. He could have taken the pasuk, I love my master, I love my woman, I love my kids. Okay, veleka. And at the beginning, he ain't got the woman and he ain't got the kids. Visu, furthermore, Amar b'sof sheish, if he says it 2 times at the end, lo Amar b'tchilas sheish, but he didn't say anything at the beginning. Ein nirtza, he doesn't get to go. Shenemar ha'eved, it says he has to be a slave. And at the very end, he's transitioning from slave to non-slave. So when he's exactly going to say, has to say it while he's still a slave. Atu sof sheish lav eved, who at the end he's no longer a slave, or maybe he is. Amarava, my bechilas sheish. What do we mean at the beginning of sheish? Okay, so we're going to now twist the words beyond all recognition. We're going to say, I'm going to use the solar because Jewish calendars vary in length. But at the end of 5 years, 364 days and 20 hours. Okay? My B'tchilas Sheish, what does it mean? At the beginning of 6, B'tchilas Pruta Acharoina. At the beginning or just prior to his very last task. So he's been a slave for 6 years. It's just hours before he gets to go free. And the master says, before you go, I want you to sweep the portico. So he says, I don't want to go. I like you. I like the woman. I like the kids. Then he sweeps the portico and he says again, I don't like you. I don't like. So it's just prior to the absolute last task. Okay? Umay B'sof Shesh. What does it mean, the very end of the 6? B'sof Pruta Achroina, at the last, just after the last act. Now, the reason the word Pruta is used here is because we learned earlier with the little girl that as long as a task has some fiscal value, in other words, if somebody else did it, you'd have to pay them a little bit. So that's the reason the word Pruta is used. It has to be a measurable value. It can't be pick up my glasses. It has to be sweep the portico or similar. Okay? Somebody had a question? Tana Rabbanan, new point. Lo isha banim. Supposing the servant, we're narrowing the nirtza business even further. Supposing the servant has a wife and kids. Ularabo ain't isha banim, but the master is a bachelor. Einu nirtza, you can't do nirtza. Shenemar ki ahevecho es beisecho, because the pasuk says that the slave has to love you and your family, and if you don't have a family, you don't qualify from that wording. Now, what about the other way around? L'rabo esho banim, the master has a wife and kids. And Ishobanim, but the slave does not have a wife and kids. Now it's a little ambiguous whether we mean before or the people, the wife he was, quote unquote, he was given.
They're not. It's not really his. I mean,
yeah, I understand, but ain't a nirtza. You can't pierce his ears. Shenemar ahafti es adoni v'es ishti v'es bonai. So it possibly, maybe even probably means the woman and kids he got during his captivity. Okay? Now, bravo. What if the servant likes the master, but the master doesn't particularly like him? No nirtza, no ear piercing. Shenemer kitov lo imov. Because he made things, he being in your service made things good for you. And if you don't like him, he's a pain in the neck. He's not a good thing. Okay. Rabbo Ohava, what if the master likes him? Vahu Ainoiv is Rabbo. He does not like the master. Maybe he likes the woman he was given, he likes the kids. He likes the dorm he's in. He's never eaten better in his life. He's not allowed to lie and say, I love my master. Einu nirtza, you can't do it. Shenemer ki ahevecha. He has to actually genuinely love the master.
Is there an objective measure for love here? How do you?
You know when you like someone and when you don't. I don't think it means love like you love Hashem or you love your father or you love your wife maybe at the beginning of the marriage. I'm
A man with a great marriage, by the way.
I'm saying over here, if dislike, this clearly objective measure for like and dislike. Even if you can't see it, you know it, right?
Okay.
So it's got to be positive emotions rather than neutral or negative. I would put it that way. Now, again, there has to be some comity between the master and the slave. What if the slave is now sick? And we're not talking about a cold. We're talking about some kind of at least semi-permanent illness. Okay, but the master is strong like bull, right? You can't do it. He brings good to your household, and a sick slave is kind of a pain in the neck. Okay. What if the master is sick and the slave is not? So you can't pierce his ear. He brings to you. So if you're not doing well, then how much could he have done for you? Okay. And I know that's challengeable, but that's what it says. Boy Bibi Bar Abaya, Abaya's son Bibi asked the following question. So far we've learned if they're both healthy, you can. If the master's healthy and the slave is not, you cannot. If the slave is healthy and the master is not, you cannot. But what if they're both sick? We didn't say anything about that. So Rav Bibi asks that question. What if they're both sick? Imach, does that qualify for imach? Ba'inan, vahu ika, and they both are on the same status. So you got an imach. Odilma kitov lo imach be'inan. You have to go back a couple of words and look at the word tov, and neither one meets the tov standard. V'holeka, the tov standard isn't met. Versus teku. Okay. Now we're going further into darshaning the pasuk. If the slave has brought good to you, Tana Rabbanan Kitov Lo Imach. Things got better for you with the existence of the slave. Imach so what is first of all, we're going to darshan the word imach. What does the word imach mean? That the slave is just like you. Okay, but Michael, with regard to the diet, if you're eating steak, you got to serve the slave steak. If you're eating whatever, the best things, he has to get the best things. Okay? Imach b'mishta. If you're drinking expensive wine, you have to offer him expensive wine. Shaloti ata oichel pas nikiya. You can't eat very fancy artisanal bread. And he eats Wonder Bread. You can't do that. And you're drinking expensive aged wine. And he gets cheap grape juice. Can't do that either. You sleep on a fancy for Stearns and Foster mattress. And he's sleeping on a bed of straw. You can't do that either. Mikan Amru, that's why we say anybody that acquires a Jewish slave winds up having a master, but has acquired for himself a master. Okay. Now, we said before the slave's wife and kids. Now, from the context, we said that meant and I'm putting quotes around the words, the family when he was enslaved. Well, what about the family he had at home? Remember, we learned that there's this descent he's going through, and he already sold his house, his field. He already sold his property, his house. He already sold his daughter. Now he sold himself. So the implication is that he has a family. Okay, Tanarabana. Yotza be'imachu ubana v'imoi. He goes out with his family and his children with him. Now, we said much earlier that the woman and the children born from the woman that's his bedmate are the property of the master, they're Canaanites. And the only reason he's with her is to increase the master's holding. So what children are we talking about here? Omer of Shimon, hu nimchar. If the guy is sold into slavery, banav of me nimcharim, were his children also sold into slavery? Was it a package? No. Mikan sharabo chayav b'mizonos b'nov. Here we see that when a wealthy Jew buys a Jewish slave, he's obligated not only to feed the slave himself, but he's also obligated to feed the guy's children on the same madrega that the family.
And wife, right?
What?
Wife and children.
Did you see the word wife there?
No. I'm asking
So
you.
what does the word say? So what are we talking about?
It's worse than the
Now we're going to get the wife. Don't jump the gun. Similarly, Ata Omer, you could tell me, Imbal Ishahu, if the man has a wife, Yotza Ishto Imo, the wife leaves too, which means the wife was sustained by the master, Omer Rabbi Shimon. Nimka ishto mi nimkara. When he sold himself, did he sell himself as a couple, a package deal, him and his wife? No, he sold himself. Mikan sharabo chayav b'mezonos ishto. So here we have the rule that the master has to provide for the guy's non-slave wife as well. Now, why did I jump on Shraga Feivel and say the banav meant banav? Because the Gemara is going to say there are different rationales for the feeding the wife and for feeding the kids. And you could theoretically argue one and not the other. So we had to keep that in cup. Okay. Vitzricha, we need both. Why? The ashmu'in and b'nov. If we only mention the children, I would say Mishum Delay B'nei Ma'eved Michael Ninahu. Because the children, we're talking about little kids, they're not really old enough to be economically valuable that they could go get a job and come up with the geld to buy their own food. Okay? Aval Ishto, the wife is an adult. The Bas Michael, Ma'avidu, she could find a job and she could provide her own food. So there's maybe I would say the kids, yes, the wife, no. The Iashme in an Ishto, if I only told you about the wife, the Lav Dircha Lahadore, because it's a past for a woman to go around door to door begging for a meal. Okay? On the other hand, Avil Banav children are all, you see kids all the time. You know, you see if somebody goes to Guatemala and all the kids follow him out of the hotel with their hands out. It's normal for little kids who don't have enough to ask for something. So, okay, so therefore, aim alone. I would say since the kids can manage to provide for themselves, even if they can't get jobs, we don't have to provide for them. Therefore, it's Richa, you need both. Okay? Tana Rabban, turn the page. New concept. Eilenemer Ozno Bedeles. The Pasuk said, with regard to the act of Nirtza, his ear to the door. So what does that exactly mean? Ha'isa Amar Yidkor Keneged Ozno Bedeles. Maybe it means you make him stand by the door and he presses his ear against the door, and then you shove the awl into the door right next to his ear and not pierce his ear. Now, I understand we already learned because of the Kohen that you do pierce his ear. This is a Havamina. Okay? Deles ein aznulo, that would mean pierce the door, not the ear, and the pasuk says pierce the ear. The oizen, okay, the oizen lo, you say you don't pierce the ear. The pasuk actually says, "V'rotza adainav es azno." The master pierces his ear, b'martzeya, with an ear piercing, with a piercing tool, an awl. Okay. Ella, so maybe what we're saying the pasuk means is Haisya Aimer Yirtza en la Ozen B'ma'avrai, that the guy pierces the slave's ear, the Yanchena al Hadeles, and then he puts the ear next to the door. Open v'yikdor keneged ozno bedeles. So now he's got his bleeding ear up against the door, and you shove the awl into the door next to where the ear was. So now we're talking about maybe it's a two-step process. Okay, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk, but the Brisa says, and the quoting the pasuk, but ozno ubedeles, through the ear and the door. Okay. Okay, said, how do you get the ear and the door at the same time? Okay. Daiker v'hoylech ad shemagia etzel delis. You start the awl through the ear and you keep pushing until it enters the door. Okay, so it's a one-step process. Now, delis, it says a door. Okay, what exactly does that mean? Shameya ani ben akura ben she'enu akura. I could take the door off its hinges and I could bring it to a cleaner room in the house so the slave doesn't get infected and lean it against the wall and go through the process with the door detached from the rest, from the hinges. Okay, Talmud Lomar. The pasuk also has the word. Pasuk also has the word mezuzah in it, the doorpost. Okay, ma mezuzah ma I made. Since definitionally, the mezuzah is upright. If it's not upright, it's not a mezuzah. It's a piece of wood. Okay, the door must be upright, meaning it must be in place. Okay? Rabban Yochanan Zakai hu dairesh es hamikra hazek min chaymar. Now, the word chaymar means the packet. If you ever went to bought gems, they take a little piece of paper. They call it a bintel. They take a little piece of paper. They put the gems in the center, and then they fold it in a special way. So that's a chomer. So what this pasuk means, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai hu yedorish es hamikra hazeh min chayma. He makes a neat bundle out of his interpretation of the pasuk. It's like a little package of drasha, something we don't experience here because the drashas are not kamin chayma. Okay, ma nishtana azen mikol averim shibaguf. What makes the ear different or unique from any other part of the body? In other words, why do we pierce his ear and not his hand or his foot or something like that? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God says in the Torah, Ozen Shishama Kaili Al Har Sinai Bishasha Amarti. This is the ear that heard me speak on Har Sinai when I said, Ki li b'nei Israel avadim. Jews are now my servants. V'lo avadim lavadim. And they're not servants to other people who are my servants. And this guy goes and wants to have a permanent master other than me, and he's doing it on his own. He does it on his own. He violates my rule and he wants to be a slave forever. So you pierce the ear that didn't hear the message. Okay, that's why it's specially the ear. Brisa goes on, Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe, Rab Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Hoya Dorish es a mikra hazem in Achaimer. He also makes a neat little bundle out of a drasha. Ma nishtana deles umezuzah shakol kelim shebebayis. What's so special about the door in its doorpost that makes it different than any other object in the house? You can't do it on a table or on the wall. It has to be the door. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God tells us, Deles umezuzah shahoyu edim b'mitzrayim b'sha'a shepastachti al ha-mishkayf al shtei ha-mezuzos v'yamarti. The door and the doorpost are witnesses to the time that I jumped over passed by the lintel of the Jewish household and the doorposts of the Jewish household, and I said, Ki li b'nei Israel avadim, that the Jews are now my servants, v'lo avadim lavadim, and not slaves to other people who are my servants. V'hotzi sami of this lecheres, and then I took the Jews out of slavery and made them free. And this dude is not interested in being free. He wants to be a slave. So the ear and the door are uniquely qualified to convey the message, not specifically to him, but to all the other slaves in the house, that this ain't the right route. Okay? So, and it ends up the Yerotza bifneihem, so pierce the ear and the door. Next Mishnah. Okay. Somebody have a question back there?
Did you ever say anything about his right ear versus his left ear?
You have to speak up. My hearing's broken.
All of the details I went through, does it make a difference if it's the right ear or the left ear?
Yeah.
It's the right ear.
It's always, we did that 2 days ago. It's the right ear. In general, when we remember, we learned Yerech, that Yaakov's, when he was limping, it was his right leg, and I might think it's only the right leg. We did that 2 days ago. In general, anytime, anything, it's the right. Okay? If you come to a fork in the road and you do not know which way to go because the sign is down, the halacha is you must go to the right. If you're standing still and you start walking, it's a halacha that you use your right foot first. Similarly, when you're saying Shemona Esrei and you take a step back, you use your left foot because that's on God's right side, Kaviyach. when you hold a Kiddush cup, it's with your right hand, even if you're a lefty. Okay, the only exception is tefillin, and that's because we do a drush in the pasuk that it's the weak arm. Okay, so it's not that you do the left, it's you do the weak arm. So if you're a righty, the left is the weak arm, and if you're a lefty, the right is the weak arm. Another exception is you lean to the left when you drink at the Seder because that's safer to do because your heart's on the left and you won't less likely to choke. But if there's any normal case, you always favor the right. Okay? You wash your right hand first. Always the right. Okay, next. Evet Kanaini, Nikne, Bekesev Ishtar Ubachazaka. And a non-Jewish slave being acquired by a Jew. There are three methods of doing it: by paying for him, by having a contract with the previous owner, or with him or the chazaka, and we're relating it to land. So when you acquire land, money is not good enough. You have to do something. When you get into your new house, you put up a mezuzah. That's a chazaka. You put up a picture. That's a chazaka. You buy a new farm, you dig a hole. That's a chazaka. We will learn in a little while how you do a chazaka with the slave. Obviously, you don't dig a hole in his chest, right? So we'll find out, but it has to be an act of demonstration of ownership, okay? So that's the case, okay? Now, if the Canaanite slave is freed, which lechatchila you don't do, but b'di'evid you can do. So why lechatchila don't you? Because when you buy or acquire in another way an Eved Kanaini, you give him a milah, and he goes to mikveh, and he becomes Jewish. Does not have all the mitzvahs that are time related because you are his boss. And you can tell him, go plow. I don't care if it's time to do, say, Kriya Shema. So he doesn't have time related, but he has the same dinam as a Jewish woman. Now, when you free him, kahalacha, he becomes a full Jew. And now he has time related mitzvahs too. He has to buy tefillin, etc., etc. But there is a reasonable chance. You can't all say that he might relapse, or whatever the right word is, to goyishkeit and worship idols and stuff. And we don't want that because that is negative. So therefore, at least lechatchila, you can't free a slave. But there are cases where he does get free. So how does that work? Kaines atzmo, he requires himself, meaning he goes free. The kesef, somebody pays for him and frees him. Al yedei acherim, it has to be another party who frees him. Or bishtar, or with a contract, meaning would be the get meshichur. Al yedei, al yedei atzmo, that he can do this with. It doesn't need money. He can make this deal with the master. So I'll just divrei Reb Meir. That's Reb Meir. So I'll just quickly. Why can't he buy him with his own money? Where did he get it? If he finds a bag of diamonds, then a master's. If he gets a job in the corner candy store, the master gets his paycheck. So under normal circumstances, a slave has no money of his own. So the Mishnah says somebody else buys him out. Okay, that's Reb Meir. He can use his own money to buy himself back. or bishtar, or yedei acherim, or a contract, even if it's between other people. If Reuven has a slave and I want to free him, maybe my daughter likes him and wants to marry him, and he can't marry a slave, I can make a deal with Reuven with a contract, and Reuven frees him, and my daughter grabs him before some other girl does. Okay, but now, so the question I ask, where does he get the money? Ubilvad sheyeh kesef shel acherim. Somebody else gave him the money. He got a gift. Okay, weiter. We'll keep falling behind. Minol and Dixiv, why does the pasuk? How do we know he can use money to buy a slave? Dixiv. V'his nachaltem oisem levinechem acharechem lereshes achuzo. It says that you can acquire slaves and they become like permanently part of the family, and your children can inherit them after you, just like with ancestral property. So the slave is equated with karka. Okay? Hekisha nakasav l'saida chusa makes a hekesh between the Canaanite slave and ancestral property. Ma soda achuza nikna bekesef b'shtara b'chazaka. Just like a field can be acquired with money or with a deed or with a chazaka, af eved kenaini nikna bekesef b'shtara b'chazaka. The goy can be acquired through those same modalities. Ima soda achuza chazeres lebaylim biyavel. So now I'm going to ask a question, the Gemara says. If you're equating the Canaanite slave to the field, if you sell your ancestral field, it bounces back on Yovel and it comes back to your family. Af Eved Kanaini Chayzer Labaylim Biyovel. So do slaves go back to the market, the slave market you bought them on? And Yovel, okay, Talmud Lomar, Pasuk says, Li'aylam behem ta'avodu. They work for you forever. And this time we learned the word forever, meaning until he dies. And his children are slaves after him. We do not interpret it as we did earlier to up to Yovel. Okay, Tana, we have a brisa. Af b'chalifin, but just a minute. There's another way of making a transfer. When you sell your chumetz, you don't pack it all up and drag it to the rabbi's office. You leave it, you put it in a closet somewhere, and you go to the rabbi, and he does chalif, and he picks something up, hands it to you, you pick it up. And that's a symbolic act of acquisition. So the Brisa says you can also acquire a Canaanite slave with chalipin. So the Tana did done. So why did our Tana leave that out? So the answer is Milsa the less of the metaltal and Katana. He's only teaching transfer methods that do not apply to movable objects. Now the slave is kikarka, but he's also can move. So he's got 1 foot in the karka box, and he's got 1 foot in the metaltalin box. So chilipin is a metaltalin method of kinyan, and our Mishnah doesn't mention that. Milsa the lesser metaltalin katani, only things that work for karka and immovable objects. Milsa the isa metaltalin lokatani. He doesn't bother mentioning the various modes of acquiring metaltalin. Okay? Nonetheless, they are effective. Omer Shmuel, Evet Kanaini Nikna b'Mashicha. When you buy something, you pull it toward you or you lift it. That's called Mashicha, and that's the act of acquisition. Giving the cashier the money is not the acquisition. picking it up and putting it in the bag, and you take the bag. That's the acquisition. So, Takafu ba etzlo kone. So Kate said, I left there with Kate said. Kate said, how do you do Mashiach with a slave? Takafu ba etzlo kanoi. By you grab his arm and you put pressure on his arm and he moves toward you. That's the act of kinyan Mashiach. Now, why did I say you put pressure on his arm? If you simply say, come here, and he moves toward you, that's not a kinyan. Now, the Gemara goes into that and why, and is it really so? Bishlam the Tanadidan, our Mishnah, Milsa the Isa b'metaltalin lo katane. We don't mention anything that's not land related. The less of metaltale katane and object related, we do not learn. Ella latana bra the Tane Mashiach, but what about the Brisa, the Tane and the Brisa, who does mention Mashiach? Okay, so why doesn't does that not there? He said with a picking the cloth chalipin. Why didn't he say Mashiach? And does that mean Shmuel's wrong? Because Shmuel's only an Amora. And the Tana who brought other things didn't list Mashiach. Ki katani milsa de Isa ben Mekarka ben Metaltalin. What does that Brisa talk about? Things that work for both. Mashiach b'metaltalin Isa Mashiach. Oh, you can do chalipin to buy land, it's symbolic. But you can't do Mashiach with a piece of land. You can't pick up the farm. So you can't do Mashiach with karka. So Ketza Takafu Uba Etzlo Kanoi Kara Ubo Etzlo Lo Katani. So we just said Mashiach means you have your hand on him. If he just walks toward you in response to a command, we say that's not acquisition. Vakorelo, but wait a minute. Doesn't getting him to do what you tell him, calling him to you, isn't that a valid Mashiach Vasanya? Kate said, Misira. How do you literally, it means turn or hand over. When we talk about the Masorah, it's because the rabbi told his Talmud and his Talmud told his Talmud. So handing over, we'll translate it that way. How do you do Masira? If you take, now we're talking about a cow, okay? If you grab the cow by the foot, or you grab the cow by its hair, or by the saddle that's strapped to it, or by the package on the saddle that's on the cow. All of those, okay. Pumbia, Shapia, or by the brace or whatever that thing, the bit, whatever it's called, that's in the mouth of the animal that you tie the leash to. Then you own the animal. Okay? Keitzad b'mashicha. So we're making a distinction now. What about if you do mashicha with the animal? Karela v'hiba'a. You say, here, Fido, and the animal moves towards you. Okay? Oh, Kisha b'makel v'rotza lefanav, or you hit it with a whip or a stick, and it moves forward in front of you. That's the second way of doing Mashiach. Kevan sha'akara yad v'regel kana. Once it lifts at least one front foot and at least one back foot in response to your signal, either pulling or calling or talking, you own it. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Omer, one of them, either Rabbi Asi or Rabbi Acha says, Ad shetahalech lefanav molei kol moso. He said it needs a little more than moving one front and one back. If the animal from horn to tail is 12 feet long, it's a big ox, then it has to move 12 feet. If it's 5 feet long, it has to move 5 feet. The animal has to move its distance. Okay? But in any event, it did not require your hand on the animal all that time. Amre, they say there's a difference between the implication. The question is, why the animal yes and the slave no? So there's a difference between animals and people. Amre, they say about it. Behema adaito demara ozla. The animal has no independent thinking ability. It responds to the intent of the master. If you say come, it comes. If you push, it goes. Eved adaita de nafshe ka'azil. A slave, even if his property is still a human being and he has an independent mind, and he acts by what he decides to do. Okay? And therefore, if you call him, it could be because he just chose to walk toward you. He's not accepting your bilus. Okay? Ravashi Evid Cotton Kibehema Dummy. But we have a Jewish rule that anybody under 12, if it's female, or under 13, if it's male, has no mind. Now, of course, they have a mind, but halachically, they have no mind. So what if they're talking about a child slave and you say, come here, and he comes? Then the presumption is he's responding to you. Okay? And calling him would do it. And we'll stop there.
Thank you.
Happy Yom Avodah. And don't forget your phone.
Now go do some labor for Labor Day.
No, you're not allowed.
You're not allowed.
No, you have to get double time.
So you get double time.
Who's going to pay?
Yeah.
Ah, good answer.
I never saw God's wallet.
It's too big every day.
Huh?
Eat every day.
Good point. Paseach es Yedecho must be a little kaivatz. Okay, very good, Erwin. Erwin, you're a sharp guy back there. I thought you're snoozing back there, but you close your eyes to concentrate.
Never, ever.
What?
But he snooze, never.
I've seen this now.
Okay, goodbye.
Have a good day. Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
day.
Have a good day.
The reason I don't take it then is because I'm very slow with tachanan and I have to tachanan and
I
after that I have
understand.
to catch up.
I understand.
They say you learn anyway. Yeah, they'll make you low.
It doesn't say anything about an earring.
They want people to see it.
It doesn't say anything about an earring, so it'll close up.
But the point is then people will know. But you're not allowed to mutilate yourself. So I mean, I don't get into women with PhDs, but men aren't supposed to be wearing earrings for sure. So that's